everyone. Welcome again to chapter 2 of Black, White, and Red All Over Reading. I'm doing some work right now and getting some other people in, but we'll be getting started in just a moment. So go ahead and get comfortable. It's too hot in San Francisco today for some tea or coffee, but whatever it is you enjoy drinking wherever you are in the world, feel free to get some, and I'll be talking with you while, while I'm working to get my friends on Hive into the discussion. Hope everybody's having a good weekend. San Francisco is having one of its very, very rare, blistering hot weekends. But of course, my book is called Black, White, and Red All Over, so I appear in costume no matter what the time or weather as best I can. Now, if it gets over 100, that's going to be a whole totally different situation. But for right now, I will be putting on my blacks, whites, and reds all over for the time being. Okay, so about 2 minutes, I will be able to get started. So get comfortable, and we will start in just a minute. I really appreciate all of you that have. I really appreciate all of you that have come on over the last couple of days. It's really been very encouraging to see how people are responding, and I really appreciated the time that we spent on Thursday. I do need to make an announcement while I work on this part. Monday, I said Monday at 1. It'll actually be Monday at 2 because I forgot that I had something else I have to do at 1 o'clock. But we'll be on Monday at 2 o'clock to do the third reading. And then on Tuesday, Miss Tennille M. Jackson is going to be giving us a wonderful review. I have no idea what she's going to say yet, but there'll be a wonderful review. And on that day, August the 18th, Black, White, and Red All Over, the ebook will be available for free download. So it'll be a lovely time for you to be able to pick up that book as a free download, as an ebook, or if you like. Now, signed copies. I know Dr. Joe Canton has asked for a signed paperback copy. And the only challenge about doing that is just that it's going to take me a little longer to get those out to you because of the difficulty that we're having with COVID-19. So it takes post offices plus the postal service is going slower, and that's an entirely different issue that we can't get into here. But it's going to take me longer. But I am going to order some author copies, and in ordering your author copies, I will be able to send those out to you. It's just going to take me a little longer than it would ordinarily. Okay, hold on. Let me drop this in for our folks on Hive. Okay, that's not. Wait, hold on. I gotta do this. Now drop this in over on Hive, and we'll be getting ready to start right after this. There we go. All right. All right. Thank you for everybody that's come in, and we're going to go ahead and get started. And of course, hello, Selena. How are you? Welcome to the second reading of the second chapter of my new book, Black, White, and Red All Over. Is making some announcements. There'll be another reading on Monday at 2 o'clock. And if you missed the first one, it's already up on YouTube that you can enjoy it after this live. We'll be on Monday at 2 o'clock. And on Tuesday, Tennille M. Jackson is making a wonderful review of this book, so there'll be content coming out around this book over the next couple of days. Thank you, Selena. I hope you're doing well as well, and we'll catch up and talk this weekend. All right. Well, since you're here, and I'm sure others are on their way, let me get started. What I'm going to do is recap. This book is called Black, White, and Red All Over, and this is the very first cover that was on the book. I did not have, I gotta get it on the camera here. I have still working for my large print draft that I have because it's easier to read. But the updated cover actually has bullet holes with the blood spots on this one. There are some, well, we'll be able to see as we go forward. There's some very tense things happening. In chapter 1, we discovered that in a very conservative little town in Virginia, once upon a time the home of the Confederacy, A new black newspaper has come along, and they've come along talking about, number one, we're going to speak back to you about the racial issues in the town, and then before they even put that out, the people involved with it. Yes, Selena, this book is actually published. I'm working with APS International, Miss Tenille Jackson. The book's already published. This is actually number 4 for me, but yes, this is the second one. Okay, so, and I will check back in on the chat in a little bit. Let me just get started because I want us to be done with this in about 30 to 45 minutes max. Okay, so first chapter, tiny little town, rural Virginia. Could be anywhere in the rural South, but I chose Virginia as a setting because Virginia is still dealing with the legacy of the Civil War. Everybody remembers Charlottesville in 2017. Hello, Demetra. I understand. No, get that A. Go get that A. Go do what you need to do. Of course, you can be kind and rewind. I completely understand. I've been there. I wish you well in your class. Go get that A, okay? I'll see you later. Thank you for coming through, Demetra. Okay, so black, white, red all over. I staged it in Virginia, partially because the events in Charlottesville in 2017 indicate that in Virginia, as well as across the South, as well as across the nation, the issues around the Civil War, namely that people of African descent with my skin color being free and equal citizens of the United States, are still not settled. So I put it there, but not in Charlottesville, made up a county considerably off to the south of there. A little place called Tinyville, in a county called Lofton County. A new black newspaper comes along and demands. But first of all, says that we're going to speak back to you anytime we want to about our issues, and we're going to tell the story the way we want to tell it, and you keep trying to portray us as savages. Oh no, we're going to put all your business out. We're going to find out and publish who the real savages are. But in the background of this, they have made what is called a Freedom of Information Act request. This actually exists. You can go and request all manner of public records using a Freedom of Information Act request. So what the people in the Lofton County Free Voice, this new newspaper, have done is they have made a demand to all the police departments and the sheriff departments in Lofton County to give up their records on arrest of black people for the previous 10 years. Adjust this a little bit. All right, there we go. For the previous 10 years. And of course, once those records are revealed, who knows what they're going to say. So, first of all, Tinyville is an uproar because the 72% of the town that is not black is not happy being talked to this way by those who are black. That's number one. So they all are coming in and out of their police department demanding that their police do something. Police Captain Ironwood Hamilton and Police Lieutenant O'Reilly, Patrick O'Reilly, have already decided it's not a police matter. It's not a crime for black people to have a newspaper and talk the way they want to talk. But the more important matter that's happening is that now their fellow police officers in the nearby towns are calling, and Captain Hamilton, at the end of chapter 1, decides to set up a meeting so that the police of Lofton County and the sheriffs and deputy sheriffs can decide how are we going to deal with this Freedom of Information Act. Now, before I start today, let me just mention, how are you supposed to deal with a Freedom of Information Act request? Such a request is really a demand. Under federal law, publicly funded agencies are supposed to turn over the records, period. Now, if you're a police department, there are certain investigation records that are not under this. But if we're talking about just straight incident reports, yeah, you're supposed to give that up. But the other police departments in this county in Virginia want to come and talk about it. So Ironwood Hamilton takes them all to dinner in chapter 2. And that's where we'll start. Chapter 2, A Difficult Dinner. Although Captain Hamilton was a teetotaler, he had a favorite bar, the Midway Bar and Grill, the last stop after Big Loft, before hitting Minneapolis and the rest of Lofton County's truly small towns and rural countryside. Midway had fabulous barbecue and was a favorite spot for all the region's veteran population, as well as lovers of barbecue all over Southern Virginia. Ironwood Hamilton was both Major Hamilton, U.S. Army Reserve, and also a grill master with little time on his hands. While he waited on his fellow officers, the captain ordered a huge to-go order for his wife and children. 3 kinds of links, short ribs, burnt ends, chicken, and his wife's favorite, tri-tip, to enjoy that night and for his wife to get set up for the weekend. "You must spend half your chicken here on barbecue," the waitress who served him said with a smile. "My wife says that with the exception of what I grill myself, this is her favorite barbecue in all of Virginia," Captain Hamilton said. "And since I don't have time to barbecue right now, this is the least I can do to keep her happy." The cook, Rufus Johnson, came out of the back at the sound of the captain's voice, his ebony skin glowing from the heat of the massive grill in the back, and his smile glowing with joy. "Dropping your check with us again? Well, if a man has to burn through his money, the best place to do it would be on your grill, Mr. Johnson." Mr. Johnson's laughter boomed all the way through the bar, a deep, rattling bass that startled a few of the captain's guests as they came through to the grill side of Midway. Lieutenant O'Reilly had only been part of Tinyville's police force 2 weeks longer than Captain Hamilton, who himself had only been in office for 3 months. The lieutenant had been snatched up right out of police academy because of the emergency that had caused Tinyville to ask Major Hamilton to also come home. Captain Sidney had a heart attack behind the wheel and gone off the road, killing his favorite lieutenant as well. That had brought Tinyville's police force down to 3. Lieutenant O'Reilly had scarcely gone through orientation, such as it was, before Captain Hamilton had arrived and essentially blown up the whole process by firing the entire old guard. Thus, Lieutenant O'Reilly and Captain Hamilton were still getting to know each other, and the lieutenant was constantly surprised by the mature man's way of approaching law enforcement and life. He was also surprised by the effect the captain had on the people around him. It didn't take a great detective to look at some of the older police officers and realize they drank pretty heavily in their off time. Occupational hazard. Being a police officer was not a stress-free life, even in rural Virginia. Still, not one guest ordered more than 1 beer in the presence of their host, none of them even over 8. Something about Captain Hamilton calmly and genially eating his Caesar's grilled salad with no dressing and a glass of sparkling tonic water with no gin added on the side just caused every man at the table to find his discipline. Lieutenant O'Reilly had seen a black man do that before. Since Thomas Stepforth Sr. had come to town, everything and everyone around him had just gotten in order. None of his grandchildren, his nieces and nephews, and none of their friends had been anywhere near legitimate police action since. Yet the lieutenant had not gotten to see how a mature family leader could have that effect up close, not until he sat down at the right hand of his commander. Dinner before the business was relaxed. Despite the higher discipline at the table, the officers still seemed very much at home with each other. Most of them were Captain Hamilton's age or older. The oldest, the hawk-like, white-haired Captain Angler from Smallville, was at least 65. Lieutenant O'Reilly was the youngest, and drank in the stories of the experienced officers with amazement. It was not long before the lieutenant could sense why Captain Hamilton had fired the old guard, and why the black population of Lofton County was fed up. It was not the racial slurs that slipped out of his fellow officers' mouths, at least at first. They were too professional for all that in public. It was that nowhere in the thinking of most of them did black people exist as more than a hassle, an inconvenience, a problem at best. Some of the comments about the Lofton County Free Boys indicated the old suspicions and hatred were neither dead nor sleeping 154 years after the end of chattel slavery. Captain Hamilton let his guests get their day off their chest and then ordered dessert, a huge pound cake, warm and fresh from the oven. While that was being gratefully eaten, he commenced the business. "So like I said when I called you gentlemen, we're here to figure out what to do with the coming of the Lofton County Free Voice. I expect that all of you were inundated with calls. They had been. Little Bird's police switchboard had crashed, complete with arcs and sparks and a small fire. In Minneapolis, the officer assigned to the switchboard had saved it by simply turning it off every 30 minutes and letting it cool down, leading to a flood of angry callers coming to the office every 30 minutes. In Shortport, citizens had skipped the non-emergency line entirely and overloaded 911, which had caused a car crash to not get reported in timely fashion. That call had to bounce all the way to Big Loft, which had big city switchboards that could handle the flood of calls, before any EMTs could be sent to the crash. And you know there is going to be trouble behind that, Captain Angler said. One of those new money Slocum brats in his Lamborghini, all upset with us because we couldn't get someone out to unbend his fender and change his tire in 2 minutes flat. Translation. A new money Slocum was one whose family branch had got their money after the Civil War, whereas the old money Slocums were extinct, or at least the old money had been extinct since 1870. Well, look, Angler, said Lieutenant Grattan from Shortport. It was sort of an emergency. His girlfriend's mascara and half her hair color might have melted and run in a few minutes more in all that heat. On the stories went until they were finished, and then Captain Hamilton shared how he and Lieutenant O'Reilly had gotten an update for their phone service, and Tinyville's switchboard had survived. This changed the mood at the table entirely. Relief and smiles broke out for a little while. But now all we have to do is figure out what we're going to do about that paper, an officer said. Oh, yes, said Captain Hamilton, which is why I called us together. Lieutenant O'Reilly jumped at the eagerness, nay, almost soul hunger, of most of the officers at that table, at the thought of the brilliant Captain Hamilton devising a strategy to deal with the paper and the black people behind it in the good old boy style. With the exception of one grim and quiet officer of about Captain Hamilton's age, with a strikingly familiar appearance, the rest leaned forward hungrily, as if someone had offered them a nice, juicy, black, burnt end. Have y'all decided what you're going to do with those Freedom of Information Act requests yet? The shock, the disgust, the disappointment, all of it was equally palpable as the officers jumped back. Some of them looked stung, as if Captain Hamilton had slapped them in the face. One of them, his face red, spat out, "What do you mean, have y'all decided? I ripped the one that came to my office up and put it in the round file and burned it. Who do these news think they are, demanding our files? Obama ain't in office no more." Now, I should pause here and say there are certain words I have bleeped out in the text, and I'm not going to say them on camera. Let's just say that what was bleeped out was an old and denigrating term for African Americans. Let's just go there. The table froze up at first, but broad agreement spread over many of the faces at the table as the seconds passed. "I am inclined to agree in substance with Captain Bragg," said Captain Johnston of Shortport's police force. "Although the requests are indeed backed by federal law, there is not likely to be serious enforcement of the law from the present federal administration. There is no need for these people, who have no knowledge of the working of the law, its enforcement, and investigative techniques, to have all that information they cannot possibly rightly interpret in hand, to bandy about to the press and social media and other sources of needless agitation." Captain Angler was more circumspect. "My son was kind enough to get on the computer and look up a bunch of stuff for me about this thing when I got my request letter. His research says there are only 9 legitimate reasons to refuse a FOIA request. One of them would be active investigations that can be compromised, but unless we reopen 10 years of cases, we don't have a legal leg to stand on in order to refuse. Angler, I would expect that you, of all people—" "I'm 68 years old, Johnston. I lived through the civil rights period. The longer the thing stretches out in the press, the worse all of us in Lofton County are going to look. We answer the request, and we thus show we have nothing to be ashamed of. We bury them in the data they want. They've got paper to get out. The storm of old news will fade out as new things happen, long before they get through all of that. If we dig in, even if the local courts decide in our favor, that paper will take all that time and agitate, agitate, and agitate. Those who feel they have been mistreated will air their stories to fill the gap. And any attempt on our part to answer the mischaracterizations will be met with, well, let's just release the records. We'll decide for ourselves. By the time we have to give up the records, the damage will be done. Lawmen who have done absolutely nothing wrong will not be safe in Virginia. The anger will be so high. And then those people will camp on every detail they find suspicious, week after week after week. 10 years of information. They won't be done for at least 2, tarring and feathering all of us in public and getting that rag read seriously across the country and the world. Lieutenant O'Reilly looked at Captain Hamilton aghast. But there was nothing reassuring in that grim marble front yet. Not only that, gentlemen, there's that pesky Innocence Project, holed up as close as the University of Virginia at Charlottesville, Lieutenant Hill said of Littleburg. You would think those boys could have at least stopped by there if they had wanted to do something helpful before that little girl was sadly killed. Miss Heather Heyer, Captain Hamilton interjected softly, killed by one in that lawless mob. Yes, that girl, said Lieutenant Hill. Anyway, imagine the situation if we draw this thing out and they end up getting the information later and calling on the Innocence Project to look into it. Once that happened, if there are any innocents we have helped to inadvertently put back to work for Virginia, and those folks find them, the scandal will go on for years. It will outlast all of our careers, except our new boy O'Reilly here. The new boy's head was spinning. Only the steady presence of Captain Hamilton was holding him steady. Come on, I can't believe you are all talking like this, Captain Bragg cried. This state has gone through a lot in these last 158 years to not have to go through this with these people. Okay, let me take a pause here before we introduce another big character. We're actually not going to get through this whole chapter today, but let me take a pause here to go back and talk about the police officers' dinner that we just read about. As a writer, I attempt to be strict but fair. And what I mean is, even the viewpoints that I don't agree with, I try to voice them fairly. And when I looked at, not often, we as Black people have our suspicions about what powerful white men in authority talk about when they're behind closed doors. We have our suspicions about that, but we're not invited to those meetings most of the time. But it so happens that I do know law enforcement officers who are Black who have been in some very high level meetings. So I kind of know from there how the tenor of these things actually goes. This is an informal meeting behind closed doors, not a public meeting, but kind of how the conversations go. I've known enough law enforcement officers of both colors to know, Black and white, to kind of know some of the concerns that police officers have when issues of police brutality crop up. And I've also paid attention to the news and many accounts that are going on as police officers deal with the Black Lives Matter climate. So I try to be strict but fair. A lot of police officers first wanted to be known that not all of them were involved in police brutality. A fact, because you can look at the data on policing across the country, and it is true that many of them have not been involved. Okay, but the next question comes, then why do you stand by those that are, and why aren't you speaking more about it? From the police officer's perspective, the conversation goes about, why do I have the burden of having to speak up for the rare few that actually do these terrible acts? I'm just trying to do my job and get home safely to my family, and I don't get any credit for that. And every time something like this happens, my life is more in danger when I go into communities, Black and brown communities, where my help is needed, but I get no respect. Now, like I said, I'm strict but fair. It makes sense that there would be police officers in a situation where 10 years of records of bad police behavior that are coming out. It makes sense that there would be at least one police captain who would say, okay, we let that information out, police officers everywhere are going to be in danger because of it, because not all of them are involved in this, but everywhere the respect of police and the regard for police officers' lives are going to go down. It makes sense that Captain England would say that because this is the conversation of many police officers in this country today. There's also another background here. What we're also looking at is a respect loss. Now, I'm going to say something here that you're going to have to take some of your own time and dig out. If you've noticed, I'm almost 40 years old, I'm 39. If you've noticed that our commercials and our mainstream media, there is a pervasive and creeping lack of respect for strong men. Now, if you're a black man in the United States, your image as being a strong, powerful individual able to determine the course of your life has not ever been fully respected in the public media. It's very hard to have a show with a black male lead for a family unless it's some kind of comedy. There have been a bunch of comedies, but very rarely is a serious drama in the mainstream ever headed up with a family with a black male head leading his family in the way, let's say, my father or my grandfathers or my uncles have done. Rarely is a black man given that kind of respect in mainstream media. But at the same time, shows like Leave It to Beaver aren't out there anymore either. So whereas the black man has gone through a chronic lack of respect over history in mainstream portrayals, we have come to a time in the last 40 years or so where also strong white male family heads are also feeling that drop in respect. Now, I'm not making a conversation about whether certain things happen are unjust or deserved. I'm not having that conversation right now because what I'm talking about is strict but fair. In order to communicate, you do have to at least attempt to understand where the other person is coming from if there's going to be positive communication. So when you sit here and listen to these police officers, there's two things going on. Number one, I have tried to give some fair perspective on what police officers are concerned about when they are dealing with the exposure of the bad behavior of their some of their colleagues toward black people. They worry that they're going to be tarred and feathered with that same brush, and they haven't, quote unquote, they haven't done anything. And also, you also have a situation where if you can get men my age, a lot of them, to go out to Charlottesville, that also tells you something about white men in my age group, that they are in the 21st century, a number of them my age are in the 21st century, afraid, maybe even as afraid as some black men their age, that they're going to lose their place in the world. They're going to lose their place of respect. Again, we're not talking about whether we agree or disagree. And I also, in writing this, also had to put something else in mind, which was, unfortunately, the tenor of American history means that these white police officers are sitting here discussing this demand only from the viewpoint of how it is going to affect their lives. Notice that no one yet has said anything about how the fact that these incidents have occurred are also desperately affecting the lives of the black people that they have happened to. But there is no thought to this. All these police officers. Now, you notice Captain Hamilton is staying quiet, and there's one other police officer in the table that hasn't spoken yet either. So they're staying quiet, they're listening. But no one yet has said anything about if these things occurred. We're worried about what's going to happen to us and our fellow officers and our jobs and therefore our ability to support our family. But nobody yet has said anything about, well, what about the black families that have actually been affected by our colleagues, if not ourselves, dropping the ball for 10 years? And unfortunately, this is how the discourse must go in many of these places of authority because you look at how decisions are made. I have talked with public officials in San Francisco, and there's one particular official I almost had to reduce to tears because I had to sit her down and tell her, You're going to go back to that office and you're going to make decisions without thinking of the pain that comes into my community. And so, yes, you're going to get talked to harshly today because you need to understand the pain so that you go back and you tell that person who's over you, who's not, how much the decision that he's about to make is going to hurt us because you're going to hear it and you're not going to walk out of here and just run from the pain that you're about to put us in. No, sit down. This goes back to something I was also saying in chapter 1. Notice that the people in the Lofton County Free Voice are not protesting. Police officers control the protest in general. They might get some help from the National Guard if things get crazy enough. Now, these black people have brought down the power of the federal government on them and are making a demand. And they have the power to, as Captain Engler has put out, they can either get the information they want or they can drag these police departments through the mud, in the paper, on social media, and in front of the world for the next several years if they don't get it. So black people here are not acting in a situation where the police can control them within the limits of their legal power. They are acting freely, and the police can either give up the records or they've got to figure out how to do something else. But already, if they do something else, they have to do something else extra legal. That's already on the table in chapter 2. Because, as Captain Engler said, there are only 9 ways to refuse a Freedom of Information Act request. Just 9. Okay. And actually, we probably, well, I'll get a little bit further. It's 4:32 now. But you have these police officers working out this problem. And there's an argument between them. Do we comply? Captain Engler's on the side of let's comply, dump the data on them, and hope that some other story comes up and the newspaper will get distracted and we'll all move on. He's 68. So he figures, who has that much time? Captain Bragg is more like 45. He's like, no way, we can't give in to these people. Who knows what they're going to do next? And besides, we did a whole lot of work 158 years ago to not have to be doing anything these people want us to do. He just said that. This state, Virginia, has gone through a lot in the last 158 years to not have to go through this with these people. Now, Captain Bragg has forgotten something. 158 years ago, Virginia decided to join the Confederacy in the Civil War. Virginia was on the side that didn't win the Civil War. He's forgotten this. He's about to be reminded. A deep sigh from the only officer quieter than Captain Hamilton at the table, his dark eyes emanating the sorrow that framed his grim face as thickly as his salt and pepper black hair. And suddenly, Lieutenant O'Reilly recognized why his face was so familiar in Virginia. Now don't you start, Lee, Captain Bragg snapped. Just because my great-great-grandfather messed up a few times, and because your great-great-great-uncle had to sign the whole thing off in 1865, doesn't mean I need a history lesson from you. I already know what happened. So here we have sitting at this table some leftover legacy from the Civil War. General Bragg was a Confederate General Braxton Bragg that you don't know about because he didn't do well at all on the side of the Confederacy in the Civil War. And of course, Lee does not require much introduction. Everybody kind of knows General Lee. The main thing is that he surrendered in 1865. And this is why Captain Bragg does not want General Lee's nephew 3 or 4 times removed to even start talking about it. However, Captain Lee has a response. He does not intend to go into it. Captain Henry Fitzhugh Lee of Big Loft's police force leaned forward in his chair and gave Captain Bragg a glare so cold one would have thought it was around February of 1865. Like his cousin, Captain Hamilton, Captain Lee was new in Big Loft's police force, and like Captain Hamilton, he knew he had a mess on his hands, very little time to solve it, and no patience for bombast from anyone. His tone was quiet, but as withering as a freezing cold day. Captain Bragg, we've known each other since childhood, so you ought to know by now that I wouldn't even waste my time on you at a time like this. We're going to stop right there because it's 4:36. So, the nephew of Robert E. Lee, infamous Confederate general, has now made the scene. Like Captain Hamilton, he also was in the U.S. Army. He's just joined the local police force. So, just like the real Lee had to make a decision in 1861 on what side was he going to get on, now we have Robert E. Lee's nephew having to make a decision about what side is he going to get on. Next time, y'all. I'm not going to get into it today, but we'll be back Monday at 2 o'clock. There are a couple things I should mention as being real facts over the course of this story. There is an Innocence Project, and it does have a branch at the University of Virginia at Charlottesville. This is why Lieutenant Hill made that crack about the protesters should have gone and burned them out. The Innocence Project is at work constantly on exonerating black people, but not all black, but mostly black men, because of the way the system is, who have been convicted of crime that they did not commit. And the Innocence Project is doing its very best to get the data necessary to get these convictions overturned. They are doing excellent work. It's something that you would consider looking up. It's a thing to realize that people are doing work on the injustices that happen in the system. It's just that the Innocence Project doesn't get the shine that it should. So I thought that I would mention it and kind of give it a little highlight so we would know there are things that we can even go and get involved in the world that would be of assistance to those that have been unjustly convicted. The Innocence Project is one of them. That's a real thing. And just as a side note, Captain Lee is based on Robert E. Lee's actual nephew a couple times removed, Robert Wright Lee IV, a reverend who lost his church because when the mess at Charlottesville started, he stood up and said, first of all, my uncle did not want y'all putting up those statues of him in the first place. Second of all, uncle and the things that he fought for, the Confederacy, all that was wrong. And y'all have made an idol out of him to support this tired stuff that you're doing. And you need to stop. It's not right. This man got thrown out of his church. It went on for a minute. But he is one of the people in the world that I respect a lot, because he gave up his position. He made different decisions than his uncle. His uncle, in order to keep his plantation and his position in Virginia society, eventually, it was more complex than that for Robert E. Lee, but that's what it comes down to, decided to fight on the side of slavery even though he knew better. There's more complicated than that, but it boils down to that. He knew better. He knew that the time of chattel slavery was ending. The man never purchased a slave in his entire life, but he inherited some, and he couldn't figure out how to run anything without them. So he got on the wrong side. His great-great-great nephew looked at the situation, looked at his position in life and said, you know what? I trust God enough to take care of me. I'm going to speak up for what's right. It cost him, but he has the respect of a lot of people. So I borrowed him and gave him a fictional cousin. But we still have to find out if his fictional cousin has as much sense as he does. Next time, let me check in the chat. Okay, let me check down the chat. I haven't looked for a minute. Let's see what's going on. Hello, Wendy. Hello, Demetra. Hello, Robin. How are y'all doing today? Okay, it's 4:40, but I'm going to give a couple minutes. Does anybody have any questions about chapter 2 of the book? And while I'm waiting for any questions, let me go and talk about, again, what's going to happen next. On Monday, August 17th, we're going to have another reading. We'll complete chapter 2. And on Tuesday, Mr. Neil Jackson of APS International is going to be giving this book, Black, White, and Red All Over, Review Day Tuesday. She's going to be giving her big review. And on that day begins on Amazon. I'll be dropping the link then. The ebook will be on free giveaway at that time. And so you'll be able to pick up free ebook copies of this through the 22nd, midnight on the 22nd. So I encourage you to go and get your copy of it. Now, if you want to jump the line, you can actually find it on Amazon now. You have to pay for it at full price, but it is there. Also, if you want to pick up the paperback at that time, it'll be discounted. Normal price $12.99, but it'll be at $9.95 for the entire week. And if you really, really need a signed copy, we can make that happen, but just with the slowdown with the post office and just the fact that I'm not going out as often, and it's that me getting packing material is slowed down because of what's happening with coronavirus. If you really want a signed copy, I am going to order some author copies, but just understand that's going to take a little bit longer. I'll let you buy them from me through PayPal. And I'll also talk to Miss Jackson about other possibilities that may be possible through APS for us to do this. But we'll have an answer about it later next week. All right. I don't see any questions in the chat. Hello to everybody who came, and thank you for being here. And I'll see you on Monday at 4. Enjoy your day, and thank you for choosing to be with me. Now, if you're on YouTube, hello. You'll get to see this later on in the day. And if you're on Hive, this will be posted up at, you will be seeing this around 12 o'clock in the afternoon tomorrow. Thank you again for coming to be with me today, and I'll see you on Monday, 2 o'clock Pacific. Bye.